Changing paradigms can be really difficult sometimes. Uh, Let me tell you a story. A long time ago, I'm really going to tell you a story. Once upon a time, a long, long time ago, there were two warriors, two of the best warriors in the world, who had never been conquered. They led armies that were the best armies of the time. And these armies, wherever this army went, this army conquered whatever came into sight. The other warrior led the other army. And that army, kingdom after kingdom, conquered whatever came in their sight and came in their way. One morning, both the armies stood facing each other. It was early morning. Both the warriors who were leading their armies behind them looked into each other's eyes, put their hands on the swords, took out the swords, and started fighting, and a great battle began. They kept fighting through the day. And when the sun was going down, only two men were still alive, the two great warriors, with cuts and bruises all over the body. Bodies weary with war, with travel, with fatigue. They stood there, surrounded by dead bodies all around them, surveying dead horses, elephants, and their soldiers. And they said to each other that it gives us no honor to go back alive from here. So let's continue fighting tomorrow morning and let only one winner go back alive. Both agreed. And they lied down there next to the dead bodies, exhausted, tired, as the sun was going down. Sometimes, and you may have felt this, sometimes when you're very exhausted, maybe you're very, very tired, you want to sleep, but you don't get sleep. The two warriors felt exactly like that. The moon came up, the stars came out, and they were lying there, just looking at the moon, at the stars, but not getting sleep. And then the first warrior spoke, and the first warrior told the other, "You know, when I go back from here," and the second one said, "If you go back from here." And he said, "Yeah, but if I go back from here, I will go back and see my son, and my son is, I think he's going to be 9 years old, and I haven't seen him in the last 5 years. I am told that my brother is teaching him the art of war. He fights with a wooden sword. When I go back, I'll give him my sword, and I'll teach him how to fight with a real one, like a prince." The other warrior, he heard that, and he said, "You know, when I go back," and he immediately said, "If you go back." And he said, "Yeah, if I go back, when I go back, I'll be meeting my daughter. And my daughter, I haven't seen her for the last 5 or 6 years. I think she will be 9 now. And I'm told that my wife, she is training her in the art of war. She too fights with a wooden sword, and I'll give her my sword, and I'll teach her how to fight like a real princess. But more than that, I also think that she should be learning how to dance, and she should be learning the art of music, and I will ensure that she learns all of that." And then the first warrior, he shared a story about his parents, his father, his grandfather, and the glorious battles that they had fought. And now, the other warrior, he shared a story about his people and where they came from. And the first warrior then shared a story about all the places that he had been to and all the strange sights that he had seen. And now this one responded with all the places that he had conquered. And in this manner, the whole night long, they kept trading story after story after story. As the sun rose in the morning, both of them got up, put on their armors, put on their helmets, put their hand on the sword, looked each other in the eye, but they could not fight each other. It is said that it is very difficult to hate somebody if you heard their stories. My grandmother used to say that, and many grandmothers around the world have said the same thing, that it's very difficult to hate someone if you've heard their stories. The world needs to listen to each other's stories. We are not listening enough. But stories unite us. And we discover ourselves through our stories, and we discover people through their stories. And we are all connected through this glue called stories. They're common, they are not very different, they connect us. But today, a lot of stories are not being heard. A lot of voices are not being heard. A lot of marginalized voices. A lot of voices of the minorities, and minorities of all kinds. Not just religious minorities, economic minorities, regional minorities, gender minorities, age minorities. The voices of the old, the voices of the very young, the voices of the very poor. These stories are not being heard by anyone. And when stories die, people die, cultures die, hopes die, dreams die, aspirations die. It's very important that these stories be heard, that these stories be preserved, and these stories be shared. And for that, it's very important that we listen. But listening, oh, that doesn't come very easily. It's very easy to speak a lot, but it's very difficult to listen. There was a reason why we were given, or we are born with 2 ears and one mouth and one tongue. But listening doesn't come. Actually, listening reminds me of another story. So let me tell you the story. You know, a long time ago, not as long back, but in the days when TV was still a new idea, there was this television seller who would go from place to place selling televisions, and it was still a very new idea. So he would go from place to place and he would sell this abstract idea, new idea to people. And one day, as he was going, he came to a village and he saw a strange custom there in that village. He saw that every evening the village people would come and they would sit around a fire and they would trade stories. They would listen and tell stories to each other. He went up to them and he said, "Hey, you guys love listening to stories? Well, I've got good news for you. See what I've got for you? This is called television. It tells a lot of stories." The villagers were really happy. They bought into that marketing speak. And every house in the village, every villager bought a TV. His sales quota for the next 3 months was met. He made his bonus. He was so happy. He went on a holiday. And then he went on to other places selling TVs. A few months passed and he was coming back. And he happened to come back the same way. Now this village happened to be on the way and he said, "I must go and visit that village and I must meet those people. They were wonderful people. Everybody bought a TV. I must say hello to them. I must say thank you to them. I must check on them and see how they are doing." So he stopped by the village. But he saw a strange sight. He saw all the TVs lying in a hut, stacked one on top of the other, gathering dust. He was really surprised. He said, "I must wait here and wait till the evening to find out what happens." In the evening, all the villagers came back. They lit a fire. They sat around, started telling each other stories. So he went to the elders and he went to the kids and he said, "Hey, what happened? I thought you guys loved stories. Everyone bought a TV. What happened?" And the village elder, he spoke up and he said, "Initially we loved the TV. It told us a lot of stories. But then it just went pack, 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 pack. It never heard our stories. It just doesn't listen." So you see, the TV is just a metaphor. It's not just the TV. The world needs more listeners. And the world needs to listen to each other's stories. But unfortunately, we are not listening to each other's stories. We are too busy trying to dominate with our own ideology, trying to dominate and drown out and shout out each other. So we are, here's one country that's trying to outshout another. Here's one religion that's trying to outshout another. Here's one group that's trying to outshout another. Here's one gender advocacy group trying to outshout another. And we are so busy raising our own flags that we have no time to listen to others. But others, their stories are no different from ours. I grew up in Gujarat, and then I went to live in Delhi. And when I lived in Delhi, I was staying in a place called Lajpat Nagar. And those of you who are not familiar with Delhi, Lajpat Nagar is a refugee colony. It is populated by Punjabis who lost everything in Pakistan during partition and came to India and settled in Lajpat Nagar. I stayed as a tenant in a house owned by a Punjabi landlord. A person who had lost everything during partition, who came back to India with hurt, with anger, with scorn, with disgust for people of a certain community. And he came and he had to start from zero base and he had to rebuild his life. One day, I sat with him and I listened to his story. And I gave him a patient hearing and he told me a moving story, a real story about his parents, about his grandparents, about their life, the other side of the border, and how they had to leave everything behind and start all over from zero base. And when he had finished, I told him my story. I'm a Muslim. And I told him my story, and I told him how we lost my maternal grandfather to partition. He was touring. My mother's a Malayali. She is from Kerala, and her father was working with Hindustan Levers those days, and he was touring. He was put on a train and sent to Pakistan. So we lost our grandfather in 1947, and he could not come back to India, to his own country, for 40 years. He got a visa in 1987 and came back as a tourist to his own country, only to live for 6 months and then die with his people. She lost her only brother to Bangladesh, to East Pakistan. We located him about 6 years ago. A cousin of mine found my uncle living in a village close to Dhaka. And when I told him that story, he realized that his story is no different from mine, and my story is no different from his. And our stories are similar to stories of many other people, both sides of the border. It's only when we listen and share stories that we discover that, like that landlord and me, his tenant, that we were two people divided by religion, but united by a single story. All of us, many of us, are united by stories like that. But to find that, we need to be able to listen to each other, and we need to be able to create that space where we are not dominating or trying to dominate or outshout each other, but creating space for a common story. Which reminds me of a story. Long time back in Congo, there was this custom that when a boy and a girl loved each other, they would build the four walls of a house. And if the elders of the village approved of their coming together, they would build the roof of the house with leaves, which meant they were married. It was that simple. So there was this guy, really handsome, good looking, hard working, honest. He liked a girl. And that girl, she had a wonderful voice, really beautiful, honest, hard working. She liked that guy. So they found a corner at the end of the village, an empty plot, and built the four walls of a house and waited. And when the villagers, the elders, they saw them, they were really happy for them. So they took the leaves and built the roof of the house, which meant now they were married. As simple as that. And when you're in love, time really flies. So time flew. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. And month 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 just went by like a flash. And then one day, I am not sure what caused the argument. But the argument happened. It was waiting to happen for 6 months in any case. Yeah, 6 months is a long time. But was it the fact that, when he was going to catch fish in the river, his friends called out to him and said, "Hey, it's been a long time. You've not sat with us. You've not had beer. You've not played cards. Come and sit with us, play cards, have some beer." And he started playing cards with them, drinking beer with them, and he got delayed. And now when he went to the lake to catch the fish, all the big fish had been caught, and he went home with very small fish, and maybe that caused the argument. Or maybe it was the fact that while he was gone, while she was pounding wheat, she got busy gossiping with the neighbor. And while she was gossiping, she didn't pay attention that there were some stones that were still left in the food, and that made their way into his mouth. And maybe it was this or maybe it was that. Even they don't remember. But once the argument started, it just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And all the things that had not been spoken of in the last 6 months, each of those things started coming out one by one, one by one, one by one. And now they started really giving it to each other. And the argument kept getting bigger and bigger, and the voices were rising higher and higher. And in anger, we don't realize what we are saying. In anger, we don't realize what we are doing. And soon, both of them were standing outside their house, shouting at the top of their voices at each other. All the villagers, they heard that and they came out, and they had never seen a sight like this in a very long time. And everybody loves a good fight. So all the villagers came out to watch, and they were really having a good time. And now the lady, she saw from the corner of her eyes that we are making a fun of ourselves. We are making a mockery of ourselves and of our marriage. Everybody is watching, and she wanted to stop. But then she heard a voice. That voice went up from her heart and told her, if you stop now, it would mean accepting in front of everyone that you are wrong and he is right. And how can you let that be? So she gave it to him big time. Now, he could see that, people are watching, and we are making a fun, a mockery of our we are really making a mockery of our wedding and our relationship in front of all the villagers. And he wanted to stop, but he heard the same voice that went up from the heart and told him, if you stop now, that would mean accepting in front of the entire village that she is right. And how can you let that be? So he gave it back to her. And when he gave it back to her in front of everyone, she couldn't handle it. She was so angry. She shouted so wildly at him that his blood rose to his face. His body became taut. Involuntarily, his thoughts started racing much more ahead than what he could handle. And his hands reached out to the roof of the house, and he pulled a leaf and threw it down to the floor, which meant exactly what you're thinking. The end of a relationship. But he was not in control of his thoughts. He was so angry, he was just pulling leaf after leaf, leaf after leaf, and he was throwing it down onto the ground. And the entire village was shocked. They were watching something that they had never seen in a very long time. The wife was standing there shocked. She didn't know what to say. And he was so angry. He was just going on doing this. And slowly he realized, everyone's silent. What's happening? And then it dawned on him what he had done. Oh my God, he wanted to reverse the clock. He wanted to turn the time back, but it was too late. He could not undo what he had already done. With these heavy thoughts, heavy hands, not knowing what to do, he pulled one more leaf and threw it down to the ground. When his wife, who was watching, she said, "Darling, you've done a fantastic job. All the dirty leaves are on the floor. Good job." And he didn't know what hit him. So he was still looking at her shocked when the wife said again, "Darling, fantastic job. I've been asking you to do this for such a long time. Wonderful spring cleaning. All the dirty leaves are on the floor." It was a lifeline. He grabbed that lifeline with both hands. The elders who were standing there, they just smiled. And they put their arms around the younger ones, turned them away, and took them back. And now it was just the two of them standing there in silence, looking at each other, no words spoken, but speaking a lot with their eyes. He said, "Thank you." She said, "Not required." He said, "Sorry." She said, "Not required." She said, "Thank you." He said, "Not required." And then both of them bent down, picked up the leaves, went to the river, washed the dirty leaves, left them for drying, and went for a swim in the river. Swam and came back. The leaves had dried and were clean again. And they took the leaves and rebuilt the roof of the house. And now in Congo, there is a new custom that whenever the leaves of a house are dirty, you know what that means, stories. These are just metaphors. So whenever the leaves of a house are dirty, people take the leaves, they wash them, they leave them for drying, go for a swim, and come back and rebuild the roof of a house. The world's roof is leaking today, and the world's roof is dirty. The world that we inhabit is not in a good space. There are, there are people who are fighting with each other, and both are trying to dominate each other, and both are trying to say my way or the highway. But we know solutions don't come when you say it's my way or the highway. The world's the world's roof's leaves need to be washed and dried clean. But that will happen not through my way or my way. It will happen only through a creative third way. The third way of the kind that she offered. A way which is agreeable to both, which is not your way, which is not her way, but a way that offers both a better solution than yours or your individual solution. And the world that we live in is a world that is in dire need of a better roof. But that better roof will come through stories, through better listening to each other, through better connections with each other. Which is why I invite you to engage with your own story and to listen to other people's stories. Stories of everyone, stories of marginalized people, stories of marginalized voices, because it is these stories that will help us build a better roof, that will take us to a better truth. In the end, I want to leave you with this thought that a long time ago there was this old man, and wherever that man went, people welcomed him and they said, hey, old man, come here, spend some time with us, have some tea and coffee with us, have some wine and cheese with us. Everybody loved the old man. At the same time in the world, there lived a woman. And wherever that woman went, people just shut their doors and windows. Nobody liked her. The woman naturally got very upset, and she goes to the old man and says, hey, why is it that wherever you go, you are welcomed, but wherever I go, I am turned away? Who are you? The old man, he just shrugged his shoulders and he said, I am story. Who are you? And she said, I am truth. So you see, nobody likes the truth. And then she was really desperate, so she took all her clothes off. Now nobody likes the naked truth. So people really didn't want to see her. But the old man had enough wisdom to realize that the world needs the truth. It just doesn't know how to handle it. So the old man went up to the woman and said, you know, the world needs you. Why don't you come along with me? And there is much more hospitality than I need for myself. There's much more tea and coffee and snacks and wine and cheese than I need for myself. I can share that with you. And Story had a wonderful coat. That old man had a wonderful coat with lots of pockets. So truth jumped and sat in Story's pocket. From that day, it is said, wherever Story goes, you can find truth. My friends, I engage you and I invite you and I encourage you to find that truth through stories that are hidden, through stories that are uncovered, through stories of the other, because in stories of other, we find ourselves. Thank you.